Brett Hornby here. Welcome to my new segment, my Calgary Stampeders This Month. Throughout the 2018 CFL season, every month I'm going to have a video recapping how my Calgary Stampeders did this past month, and I'll break down each game and give you an outlook on what they have to face next month. So here we go. June 2018. This is how my Calgary Stampeders did this past month. I'll grab my notes here. So first couple weeks were preseason weeks, which is kind of basically a trial and error, especially with all the new players that Calgary came in with this season at camp. And I call it the youth movement, with a lot of veterans being not resigned or retired or got traded away. So they were 1-1 in the preseason. The first game they played on Friday, June the 1st at home against the BC Lions, and they lost that game 36-23. But basically Calgary looked like the better team when they had all the regulars in, and then afterwards they brought in all their backups and camp invites, and ultimately Calgary lost to the BC Lions, where their quarterback Ricky Lloyd, who had 3 touchdowns. So I personally didn't take in that game because it was only preseason and I was a little under the weather. But usually the first week of preseason you only see your regulars for a couple series a quarter, and then they come off, and then you bring in all your backups, which after when I recap the preseason, I will mention some big names that didn't make the team and some notables that made the team. And the second preseason game happened on Friday, June the 8th. They were in Saskatchewan at Mosaic Stadium. They actually destroyed the Saskatchewan Roughriders 39-12. And I think one factor was that they had more time to have their regulars in, and with a quirk in the schedule with Saskatchewan playing Edmonton almost 2 weeks prior, with the unbalanced schedule, the Eskimos played their 2 preseason games in the first week before everyone else got to play their first games. That's what happens when you have 9 teams in the league. You have an unbalanced schedule. But maybe the Saskatchewan Roughriders came off some rust where they barely got to play after camp started against the Edmonton Eskimos, and then almost went 2 weeks without a game in preseason. But basically in preseason, a couple games stood out that made the team and have already made some of an impact. I mean, Calgary has 2 different quarterbacks backing up Bo Levi Mitchell, because in the off-season, just before camp, Andrew Buckley, who was the number 2 guy, decided to retire to take a position at school to study medicine. And it's one of those things where if you have a spot available at the university to study medicine, you can put that off. So best of luck to Andrew with studying medicine and becoming a doctor, which is what he wanted to do. And the other quarterback, he was here last year, was in the Kansas City Chiefs organization, was Ricky Stanzi, and personally I wasn't really sold on him on being someone you can count on to be a backup in case Bo Levi Mitchell is underperforming, or the worst case scenario is hurt for a while. But the 2 guys that took their place was one guy named Nick Arbuckle. He kind of kicked around for the last couple of years, where he was signed on the practice roster as a 4th guy, and got released, and he came back on, got released, but now he's our number 2 guy, and as I go through, he's been used in short yard situations. And Larry Braun Jr., if I said his name right, is our 3rd string quarterback, and he actually looked quite impressive in preseason in limited play. So we'll see how those 2 guys gel throughout the season. If you happen to need to see them play in the action, hopefully it's because we're well out ahead as opposed to Bo Levi Mitchell being hurt. And one player that, when the cuts were made after preseason, that you could say was a little bit of a shock, but maybe not, with the depth of receivers, is Anthony Parker, the local guy we drafted 3rd overall back in 2011. He was actually released at training camp with depth at receivers. I mean, I know the one guy that Calgary's high on that's made it out of camp is named Richard Sandini, who actually is another local guy. He played for the Calgary Colts. But another guy that is coming back, who's already made an impact, is Eric Rogers, who for the second half of 2014 he had a great run and definitely had a big game in the Grey Cup. And in 2015 he had a breakout season where he led the season and led the league in receiving yards, and then he decided to try his luck in the NFL at the San Francisco 49ers, but unfortunately injuries. He had a knee injury in 2016, and then he got released. So this is Eric Rogers making a comeback attempt with the Calgary Stampeders, and as I'll go through with the first 3 games this season, I've been impressed so far. And then the other big signings in the off season, which I say was definitely needed, was we got Derek Dennis back on the offensive line, who he won the most outstanding lineman back in 2016, then decided to test the free agency market, got paid when he went to the Saskatchewan Roughriders last season, but then eventually released him due to cap reasons, and Calgary had a bunch of injuries and retirees on the offensive line, so we had to bring him back for depth and solidify our offensive line. And then we picked up Emmanuel Davis, defensive back who played with Hamilton most recently. He's been making some plays here and there. And another guy that we picked up for defensive back is S01E01, who most recently played with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And then the last guy I mentioned is Eric Rogers, and already it's been a beautiful day in the neighborhood with Mr. Rogers back in Calgary. So that's the preseason in a nutshell. That we're 1-1. Now let's go off to the regular season. And on Saturday, June the 16th, was week 1 of the regular season. We were at home at McMahon Stadium, and we opened the season up with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And how I'd summarize that game is the fact that I feel that Calgary moved the ball well, especially in the first half, but they just couldn't finish off drives and had to settle for field goals. And Jeremiah Mazzoli, who was the starting quarterback for the Hamilton Tiger Cats the second week of the season, when June Jones took over, that's where Hamilton had the second half surge. And in the last 10 games of the 2017 regular season, Jeremiah Mazzoli led the league in passing, which is quite impressive. And also, he kind of got forgotten, but if you're... I've been living under the rock. Johnny Manziel, Johnny Football, went to training camp at the Hamilton Tiger Cats and actually looked good in preseason. Is actually their number 2 guy, but I saw Johnny Manziel just in uniform at the game. He did not play or make an appearance under center at the game against the Calgary Stampeders in week 1. And then I said the other big storyline before we get to the fourth quarter is Jawan Breskison. Yeah, I gotta say, it's only week 1, but I say that's the catch of the year. He had that one-handed catch. He took an interception away from the Hamilton defender. I said that's up there with Deron Carter's touchdown catch from last season. And when I was home watching the highlights, they even brought up Odell Beckman Jr., the one-handed reception that he made with the New York Giants in the 2014 NFL season. That's how impressive that catch is. So that's definitely the catch of the year candidate already. And we're only talking about week 1 in the regular season. But Calgary's offense definitely woke up in the fourth quarter. That Kamar Jordan catch the first reception for a touchdown, and Calgary had a 7-point lead late in the fourth quarter, and Brandon Smith picked up a critical interception while Hamilton was driving down, and eventually our running back duo of John Jackson and Terry Williams, well, Don Jackson had a 40-plus yard run for a touchdown with less than a minute left in the game, and Calgary solidified the win with a 28-14 win over the Hamilton Tiger Cats to start the season 1-0 and win the home opener. And Calgary's actually continued their dominance against the Hamilton Tiger Cats at home. So week 2, they had their first game on the road. This was the much anticipated Grey Cup rematch, where the Calgary Stampeders went to BMO Field to take on the Toronto Argonauts and try to maybe seek some revenge, and boy, they did. This was definitely a complete effort by the Calgary Stampeders. offensively, defensively, and even special teams made an appearance on how dominant the Calgary Stampeders were. Bo Levi Mitchell, well, the week before he had his worst completion percentage. I think it was around 47%. He was over 94%, throwing for 20 for 22. He was connecting the long bombs with everybody. He spread the ball around with the receivers, which is the beauty with, I think, with the Calgary Stampeders this year. Is it's whoever has their hot hand, it should frustrate defense on who's the top receiver for the Calgary Stampeders. But in that game, Eric Rogers definitely proven he's back, because he had 5 catches, 2 of them were touchdowns in the end zone, which was his neighborhood, as we say, and had over 130 yards reception, lead the way. But he also had guys like Tavares Daniels, Cabar Jordan. They also had big games. And also Don Jackson continued his running and being the early leader in the rushing title. Don Jackson, they said a commentary on the TSN that he runs angry and smart. So far what we've seen from Don Jackson, he's definitely a speedy guy, and they even platoon him with Terry Williams. So right now Calgary's looking good with their running game, when their question marks was who was going to take over for Jerome Messam and Roy Finch. And also, I said this was a complete effort. They definitely got revenge on the Grey Cup rematch, and in no total offense they put up 564 yards, which is definitely impressive against Toronto, who was known for their tough defense. Although I've been putting this off, inevitably, what took away from all the getting revenge on the Toronto Argonauts in the rematch is, unfortunately, Ricky Ray, who I have to respect as a quarterback, who's thrown for over 60,000 yards in his time with the CFL, with both the Edmonton Eskimos and the Toronto Argonauts, and he's won 4 Grey Cups. Unfortunately, the game was out of hand. He had an unfortunate hit where he looked like a regular football play. He went down for a sack. Unfortunately, it was Jagard Davis and Micah Johnson on the play. He went down funny. He took a head shot, and he was down for several minutes. He was pointing to his head like this in the field, and he was carted off and definitely was strapped, being careful, suspecting head injury. All I can report is that this game happened on Saturday. He was released from hospital on Monday. He was able to feel his extremities, but the big thing is that he's recommended that he's out for the season. So who knows? I can't throw out the possibility that this could be the last play we saw Ricky Ray ever play in the CFL, which would be a shame, because he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's been a predominant quarterback for the CFL for many years. I mean, he came in 2002. I mean, he tried his luck with the NFL Jets in 2004 and he just wasn't happy holding a clipboard, so he went back to Edmonton knowing that there was a job waiting for him there, and then all he's done is put up yards, win Grey Cups. Believe it or not, he has not won the Most Outstanding Player award, which is hard to believe, but we all respect Ricky Ray. Hopefully he speedy recovery, and maybe you'll still see him play in the CFL, or hopefully he doesn't come out with an injury, because I know Anthony Calvillo, his last play in the CFL resulted in an injury. So anyway, going back to the score here, the Calgary Stampeders really took care of the Toronto Argonauts with a 41-7 victory, but to start to be 2-0, but Ricky Ray, the injury, and then recent developments coming out that he's out for the season kind of overshadows all that. And then the last game in June, week 3, was Thursday, July the 28th. They were taking on the Ottawa Redblacks back at home at McMahon Stadium. And surprisingly, given recent history between these two teams, this turned out to be a real defensive struggle, especially in the first half. I mean, both teams, Trevor Harris, Bo Levi Mitchell had struggled getting the ball moving. I think Ottawa had the slight edge in the running game in the first half, but there wasn't that much offense put up on the board in the first half. I think, if I recall, last night it was 7-6 at halftime for Calgary, but it was definitely a very uneventful first half. At least we had the James Barker Band performing at halftime. I know TSN makes a big production of this Thursday night football thing. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Thursday night football for both short weeks for the players, but my work schedule when I'm up early sometimes takes a toll. So, but anyway, they have concerts for each game, and we had James Barker Band, who's a Canadian country music artist. I have that video. I have already uploaded that video, so you can check that out. I did the best I can, zoomed in the stands with my Samsung Galaxy S9. The arms not getting too tired and contending with people moving in the stands, but already that video's received well, and somebody on Twitter thanked me for posting it. So the other stories that I could say is that with the short week that Calgary played in Toronto last week and then playing in Hamilton, playing in Toronto and then playing in Ottawa, is that the fact that they only had one practice in, and Dave Dickinson wasn't too happy with how the Stampeders looked in practice, and I think some of that translated out in play, because Calgary definitely took too many penalties. There were definitely a lot of offsides, and procedures they definitely made it a lot harder when they had short fields where a couple offsides and procedures, instead of it being 1st and 10 at the goal, it was like 1st and 20, or at one point there was a 1st and 20. But eventually, the big storyline was in the fourth quarter. Calgary was up 10-7. Ottawa was marching down the field, and they had 3 chances to punch in the end zone, and the 2 big plays that definitely turned the game around for Calgary was that second down, second goal for Ottawa. Sonny Evans kind of had a WWE smack tackle. Said, "No, you're not coming in our end zone." And then third down with the short yardage gain in for Ottawa. The whole defensive line, led with Alex Singleton, definitely snuffed out Ottawa's chances, and then they turned the ball over. And I think that there reignited the offense for the Calgary Stampeders, because in the fourth quarter they put up 14 points alone after Eric Rogers had the only touchdown in the first half. So I definitely say that Calgary definitely hasn't looked as good at home, but all that matters is wins in the win column. And the other thing to note in this game is that Bo Levi Mitchell put up 20,000 yards passing, and he's definitely up there with guys like Doug Flutie and Henry Burris. Those are other guys that threw 20,000 yards for the Calgary Stampeders. So that's an impressive stat. It's a milestone for Bo Levi Mitchell. I say congratulations and keep doing what you're doing. So at the end of the day, the Calgary Stampeders pulled one out off the backs of our defense with a 24-14 victory over the Ottawa Red Blacks to start the 2018 CFL season 3-0. And the last time that the Calgary Stampeders started the season 3-0, I was celebrating hard in Vancouver because it happened in 2014. So I don't know. Let's hopefully maybe history repeat itself. So the recap here after preseason, where they lost 36-23 week 1 against the BC Lions at home, and week 2 where they won 39-12 on the road in Saskatchewan. So week 1 they beat the Hamilton Tiger Cats 28-14 at home, and then they beat the Toronto Argonauts in Toronto week 2 41-7, and then most recently week 3 they beat the Calgary Ottawa Red Blacks with a 24-14 victory. So now looking ahead in July here, next week, week 4, the Calgary Stampeders actually have a bye, so they definitely will have some time off. And actually this year in the CFL, part of maybe their attempt to reduce injuries is that each team will have 3 bye weeks instead of 2 like it was in the past, which is why the season started a little earlier this year. And the Grey Cup is still going to be played the last Sunday in November, as with the Grey Cup being in Edmonton on Sunday, November 25th this year, and it'll be Sunday, November 24th in 2019 here in Calgary. So there was some talk about maybe moving the Grey Cup a little earlier so that maybe weather doesn't play a role, but well, that's to remain to be seen in 2020. But the other thing to note here is that because we have an unbalanced league with 9 teams and 3 bye weeks, you're going to have one team that's going to have a compressed preseason schedule, which the Edmonton Eskimos had that, as they played both their games in 1 week in the preseason, and then they had 2 weeks of camp before they decide their practice roster and started week 1. But the Ottawa Redblacks had a week 1 bye, so that was only their second game of the year, so they didn't play the first week. And I looked ahead in the schedule, and the Saskatchewan Roughriders have a bye, their third bye in week 21, so essentially they're going to be finishing the season before everybody else, and sometimes that could be interesting when it comes to playoffs. I know Calgary had the last week off in 2016, and Edmonton had the last week off in 2015, and what happened both of those years is that they hosted the Western Final, and so they had 3 weeks off from the last week of the season to the Western Final, but it didn't seem to hurt them in those cases because the team ultimately won the Western Final to get to the Grey Cup. So July, that's week 4, so Calgary has a bye. Week 5, the next game they'll play would be Thursday, July the 12th. They'll be playing the Ottawa Redblacks again at TD Place Stadium, which is a place that Calgary's actually struggled to win in lately. And then week 6, Saturday, July the 21st, they'll be back home here at McMahon Stadium against the Montreal Alouettes. And then to wrap up July, week 7, Saturday, July the 28th, they'll be playing the Saskatchewan Roughriders at Mosaic Stadium, which this will be the first time Calgary will play a Western opponent this season. And there's definitely going to be some storylines there with a lot of former Stampeders facing the Roughriders and vice versa, but we can talk about that in the next video when I do my Calgary Stampeders this month for July 2018. So anyway, this is the first time, this is a new segment that I'm planning on doing throughout the 2018 CFL season, and I do intend to do this for the Calgary Flames and maybe the Hitmen as well. I'm not too sure how often, and I'll definitely do this for the Calgary Roughnecks. I feel for the Stampeders and Roughnecks, doing it once a month is perfect because they play 3 or 4 games a month, but I think for the Flames and possibly the Hitmen, I'll have to decide how frequently I want to do those segments. But anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoy what you see, and I'll see you at the next video. And if you're following along, I'll see you next month for my Calgary Stampeders this month.